Recipes for technical trading success in Cook's Kitchen.
What's $1 billion between friends? That's the question we're going to ask today as we look at the billions of dollars that were lost in Valiant Pharmaceuticals. A couple of friends that you might be aware of, Bill Ackman, fund manager for Pershing Square, and Mike Pearson, the CEO of Valiant Pharmaceuticals, had a plan. In 2015, they were going to buy another big pharma company, maybe Allergan, maybe somebody else. And they worked together. Bill Ackman became a big shareholder in Valiant and has now proceeded to lose billions of dollars as the stock collapses. So I'm going to do a deeper dive autopsy, I call it. And we're not just going to be talking about Bill Ackman because many other investors lost many billions in this stock collapse. You may know that earlier this week I did a podcast with Tracy Reinick here. So you can just Google that, the Zacks Market Edge podcast. We talked about that situation for about 20 minutes. Now we're going to get some visuals on this so you can see where the money disappeared. My first chart is just a weekly chart of Valiant Pharmaceuticals going back to early 2014, around the time when I was an investor in Valiant Pharmaceuticals, following some of the big guys. So, and I got out, took some profits above 120, watched the stock drift down, was thinking about looking for an entry because I saw that many of the big funds that I followed were still buying. So we come into early 2015, and I'm seriously thinking about buying again. In fact, Tracy bought some shares of Valiant because the insiders were buying. So she bought it for insider trader. And so here I was in early 2015 thinking, you know, I really want to get back into this stock. I'm looking for a pullback to 140. It never came because this is about the time Bill Ackman comes in. He's making plans with Pearson, and, you know, they're going to buy something, whether it's Allergan or somebody. And then we'll get into the whole autopsy of what happened with this collapse. You know, you got to wonder, just if you're a technician, you're looking up here at the strength. Look at this RSI pushing above 80 for so long. You would think that somebody would have been thinking about taking some profits off the table after this terrific run in Valiant. I only know of one investor who did, and I'll tell you who played this like a genius for about a year. What else did I want to show you on this chart? I think that's about it. I'm going to show you this is from early 2015. I looked at the holders of Valiant because I was looking to get back in. And so I was showing my FTM members who was I following if I wanted to get back into Valiant. These are the big guys who own most of the shares. And you talk about concentration. Ruane, Cunniff, and Goldfarb, more popularly known as the Sequoia Fund, they owned 34.5 million shares. And at the time, that was over 9% of the company. So, you know, and they'd owned the shares for a long time. So, you know, they'd already doubled their money in early 2015. Then you have Value Act. This is Jeff Ubben, and he's a genius investor. He was the guy who plunked down $2 billion in Microsoft at $25 in early 2013, and basically doubled his money there. T. Rowe Price, T. Rowe Price has a big position here, but it's small relative to to their assets. Then Lone Pine Capital. This is Steve Mandel. I followed him many times. He had a big position, almost 11 million shares. And this is actually Q3 of 2014, because I was doing this in January of 2015, so I still didn't have the final 13F filings for the last quarter of 2014. So I was just looking at the Q3 2014 holdings. But I'm just setting this up for you that this is something I followed closely, and we're going to see how it all melts down. Viking Global Investors, Andreas Halverson, a true Viking, he owned quite a bit of shares too. All right. So, these are the guys that I wanted my FTM members to get to know, because these are the guys we were following. And back then in January, I sort of highlighted, how big is the fund and how many positions they hold, because I wanted to tell a story about concentration. Here, Jeff Ubben of Valiant loves to concentrate. He had $16 billion under management in only 16 positions. If that's not concentration, I don't know what is. But that's how many big investors make fortunes, not by owning 100 stocks, but by putting significant money into maybe their 20 best ideas. Lone Pine, again, 50 positions, 25 billion. And then I want to highlight this guy, White's Investment. This is Wally White's. He, smaller manager, 5 billion spread across 70 positions. But he was one of the guys I followed because I loved his philosophy. He's sort of the Warren Buffett you've never heard of, a Graham-style investor. And he liked Valiant for a lot of reasons 2 years ago when it was trading below 100, and then even when it was trading at 140. And so I was willing to follow him because of his due diligence on the company. We'll see if everybody did their due diligence or not, because I think this is one of the biggest stories of 2015, the collapse of Valiant. Not only who lost billions, but we're talking about some really smart investors. And what was the extent of their due diligence to know that Valiant could have been involved in some illicit practices with their pharmacy Philidor, and there's going to be some fraud that's found out. There's going to be allegations of fraud, and there's going to be investigations and probably lawsuits because of the billions that were lost. Now let's look at where that money went, who had it and who didn't. So now this is at the end of the second quarter of this year. You can see Sequoia, that's Ruane, Cunniff, and Goldfarb, still hold about 34 million shares. They sold a little bit. They sold 200,000 shares. And they did this for a few quarters, just taking a little bit off the top. But look at this column here. Okay, well, let's look at several columns. The market value, what's that worth? $7.5 billion. Because at the end of June, Valiant was, maybe it's trading around 200 bucks. I'm not exactly sure, but look at the percentage of the portfolio. It was 36% of their funds. Enormous. Okay, here's Pershing Square, Bill Ackman, 19.5 million shares, $4.3 billion worth, 30% of his fund. You can start to see the writing on the wall here with that kind of concentration, what's about to unfold here. Value Act, it was a big holding for him. As we pointed out, Fidelity's in there. Obviously not that's a pimple for them. Paulson, John Paulson's in here. It was 9% of his portfolio, $2 billion worth, 9 million shares. Let's see here, Bank of Montreal. Who else do I want to show you? Oh, here's Lone Pine. Here's Steve Mandel down here with only 5.3 million shares. So he sold some coming into 2015, taking some profits, as did Andreas Halverson. So these guys, remember, both had, I believe, let's go back here a second. So here's Lone Pine with 10 million, almost 11 million shares, and Viking with 10 million shares. This is Q3, when this of 2014, when the stock is still trading below 100, and so they clearly took some chips off the table. Smart guys. But let's fast forward to the collapse of Valiant. And next I'm going to show you what were the holdings at the end of September, because we just got all those 13Fs. They had to be in by the 16th, which was Monday at the latest. The 13Fs had to be filed with the SEC. And those show us who held how many shares on September 30th at the end of Q3 of this year. Why did I want to show you this chart again? Well, just to show you how quickly it collapsed. So, so if we go back here to June, here's June. This is only a 6-month chart. So you can see the stock was trading. Yeah, it was trading above 200 bucks. So anybody selling in Q2, that was the right thing to do. A lot of these guys had 100%, maybe 150% gain in Valiant because we started buying it at 70 bucks in 2013. And a lot of these guys were already in it or adding. So many of them had 100% gain, 150% gain. So smart to see Lone Pine, Steve Mandel, and Viking, taking some profits here above 200 bucks. So then, then this is when things start to unravel. There's the Hillary tweet about drug pricing. Then there's actual subpoenas from Congress. Then Citron gets involved. And then it was here where things got really ugly. The stock cratered below 160 in a matter of days, went all the way down below 100. And that was when Citron published part 2 of their report where they said they had a smoking gun. And this was a pharmacy in Los Angeles. They talked to somebody. There was word going around that the way the money, the way drug pricing, the way drugs were getting billed, and what that pharmacy was collecting for Valiant, there was something fishy about it. And that's what Citron was over, and that's why they said they had a smoking gun. That's when the stock collapsed heavily, from 180 down to almost 80. And here we are bouncing today above 80. Okay, so let's go to the end of the third quarter of 2015. Who was still holding on to Valiant? When the stock, let's go back 1 second. So where was the stock at the end of September? It was between 160 and 180. We'll call it, we'll call it 180. So 180 bucks, that's where everybody owns their shares. And here you go. Sequoia still with 34 million. They actually bought some in Q3. They bought 38,000 shares. What else is interesting here? Pershing, Bill hasn't moved. He still has 19. He still has remember, he bought these in the first quarter of 2015, his 19.4 million shares. I believe he did some with options that he was able to exercise, and just didn't change his position, didn't buy or sell, hung on to the whole thing right into the collapse. Whoops. Okay, Value Act still has 15 million shares. Who else do I want to point out here? Look at JP Morgan Chase adding 2.7 million shares in the third quarter. You think they're pissed about this collapse? Paulson still had nearly 9 million. GMO, this is Jeremy Grantham. Grantham, Mayo, and Van Otterloo is GMO, and that's Jeremy Grantham. They built a big position in Q3. They bought 6.46 million shares, and they'd held about 1.5 million. So big buy for them, big new investment, probably at an average price of 200 for GMO, and that has been more than cut in half. Lone Pine Capital. So this is this is not what I wanted to see. So Steve Mandel buying back in. Here we got all the way over on the right, 2.1 million shares in Q3 he bought. By the way, these tables are from Whale Wisdom. Great resource to go back and look at this kind of positioning, and a lot of it's free. Much of it is on a subscription model. So I'm sorry to see Steve Mandel jumping back in right before the thing collapses. Who else do I want to show you? Viking. Well, Andreas got back up to 5 million shares. He bought another 376,000. Okay, and percentage of portfolios. A lot of these guys. I mean, this fund, Brave Warrior. I forgot the name of the manager here, but just over 5.5 million shares, 31% of his portfolio. Now you can see these changes here. Look at what happened to Bill. So VRX was 30% of his portfolio at the end of Q2. Now it's only 25%. Why? Because the value collapsed by $1 billion, even from the end of Q2 to Q3, because the stock closed Q2 above 200 bucks, and then he's marked at 180, whatever. So, the simple math here is that every 100 bucks on 10 million shares is $1 billion. So that's why many of these funds lost many billions. Sequoia lost, if I do the math here real quick and just call it, they lost at least $5 billion. Because, from the top, $150 times 10 million shares is 1.5 billion. So you do that 3 times, you're talking about a big chunk of change there. Okay, so let's see what else I wanted to show you here. Oh, I left my notes over there. I can see my notes from here. Oh, so the other genius trader, and truly that played Valiant well, was Jana Partners. This is Barry Rosenstein. Jana Partners, not Janice, Jana, Jana. They were buyers coming into 2015. Probably they were building a position in 2014, long Valiant, and they just kept selling every quarter, and they were completely out. They sold their last 1.4 million shares as of September 30th, so they missed the collapse below 180. So, they managed about 10 billion. One of the few funds who played this right. Who else did I want to tell you about here? Well, there's just tons of questions. I want to see who was adding in. Oh yeah, here's where Paulson got up to. Let's see, where did I go? I want to go one more this way. Okay, so this was, again, Q2, June 30, 2015. This is where Paulson got up to 9 million shares, was in the second quarter. So he's buying that run up. He bought nearly 7 million shares. And let's go back to my price chart. So where is Q2 on here? Q2 is roughly this area. Here's April, May, June, right in here. So Paulson buys nearly 7 million shares. The lowest price he would have paid would have been like 190, and the highest price he would have paid would have been 240. So this is where Paulson has accumulated the bulk of his shares. So he's out. He's out a couple billion too now. All right. What else did I want to tell you about? Okay. So a lot of this stuff I have to double check. I have a screen that I run every day looking at 13 Ds and Gs, which are the filings that have to happen within 10 days if an investor increases their position over 5% of a company. So I look at that every day. I also go to the SEC website, sec.gov, and try and verify stuff because there are errors. Now, so let me talk about the SEC errors. Remember Avon about, 3-4 months ago, all of a sudden, big spike in Avon because there's a rumor of a takeover and there's an SEC filing. Somebody has bought, 5-10% of the company. It turns out that filing was false. And when the SEC was asked about it, the explanation was, we can't track the validity or the authenticity of every filing. I was stunned when I heard that because, you would think there would be a procedure in place. You cannot give the SEC a filing that says you own X amount of shares of a company without, some vetting process. So that's something to keep in mind. And there are often mistakes in the filings. There are amended filings. You think somebody has increased a position, and then you go back a week later and see there's an amended filing. No, they actually decreased it. What was the other thing I wanted to point out? Oh, so I've showed you who was still holding Valiant, right before it collapsed from 180 down to 80, another $100. Why don't we have any filings from anybody that sold? Well, if they are selling, and probably many of them were in the past month here, they don't have to tell the SEC, hey, we're reducing our position. They only have to tell the SEC if they're increasing their position. Now, many do make a filing about when they've reduced a position. They just let the SEC know, hey, here's our new position. And then you have to do the math. Hey, what did they own before? What do they own now? So we don't know who sold out. Is this Paulson selling here as we go from 180 down to 80? Is this Lone Pine Capital? Is this Let's see, who else can we look at? You know, is this value act? Is this it could even be Ackman selling when the whole thing collapses on him. We don't think it's Ackman though, because he actually bought more, he said. I haven't seen that filing, so I'm not positive. But I'll tell you who I know didn't sell, and that's Sequoia, because they actually had to file a 13G showing that they bought 2 million shares, because their position is now 36 million shares. So they bought this falling knife instead of selling. So we know that $100 drop from 180 to 80 was not Sequoia selling, because they were actually buying. All right, what else did I want to tell you here? So I told you about Avon. How about some good news? Let's step away from Valiant for 1 second. I just want to tell you about a company that I own for the FTM trader, Mobileye, which, the stock is beaten down. It looks like it's in this descending triangle. It wants to crack 42 and go lower. Who knows? But we've got some great big buyers in there. Sands Capital bought nearly 11.7 million shares, like 11.68 million shares. New position in Q3 for Sands Capital, and these guys are serious quantitative investors. Frank Sands started the fund in 1992. They manage about $40 billion. And they're a serious quant fund, long-term investors in growth companies. They don't call themselves value investors, but so they're buying growth in key industries and areas of the economy. So I was very encouraged to see them plunking down a big chunk of change in Mobileye, probably an average price of $50 a share, 11.7 million shares. You're talking $600 million investment for them, and I see that as a long-term play for them. And my buddy Steve Mandel at Lone Pine Capital bought nearly 6.4 million shares, new investment in Mobileye. So that's symbol MBLY if you want to take a look at Mobileye. This is the automated driver assistance systems, the camera. And right now, the Department of Transportation in the U.S. wants automatic emergency braking in all vehicles in the next few years, because they're like, the stats show if you can reduce the rear end accident from somebody not paying attention or on their phone or whatever, you can save a lot of lives and a lot of injuries. So this is automatic braking is one thing, but the automated driving that's down the road, Mobileye is going to be in. They're already working with 25 auto manufacturers. And their system on a chip with the camera and integrated into over 50 models of cars. So it's a very exciting area. Stock is pricey on a valuation basis, but you have long-term growth investors like Sands and Lone Pine looking out 5-10 years with this investment. All right, I hope you enjoyed my Valiant autopsy, and I invite you to learn more about Mobileye, which I own shares for in the FTM Trader. And probably do this SEC, quarterly holdings thing at least once a quarter, because it's fun to look at this stuff and there's so much to talk about. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen, and we'll talk to you next week.